people active in research. That differs between the countries. So the biggest stations are in Holland and France, I think, and then New Zealand. Romania is small. It's a smaller program focused on East Europe, but altogether about 100. And that differs from people with PhDs to people that do the work in the field. So a lot of different levels. We also have bioinformaticians that just sit in the office and study DNA sequences. So there's a lot of different disciplines involved right now. It becomes more and more molecular. So when I started plant breeding in 1992, it was all about stuff that you see in the field and the data you generate. But the last 10 years also in grasses we see molecular work coming in. That means we look at the DNA sequence of a plant and try to combine that with traits. Okay, so that is increasing in importance and also in time and effort and in money spent. Okay, so like I said in the past, you just look at all your thousands of plants that you have in the field and decide what to do with them based on what you see and what you measure. But now we just look at DNA, and sometimes you only look at DNA, and based on the DNA you try to predict how a plant will perform in the field. Okay, so that's I would think the biggest change that happened, and you see that in all species. It's not just in grasses, but in all species. And of course we work in multiple species, so grass is a lot of different species, both turf and forage. Okay, so that's also a difference, of course. And we apply those genomics, so the molecular work, we apply that mainly in the bigger species, so which is perennial ryegrass, tall fescue, lucerne. So those are the big global species also, in which it pays off to invest money in molecular work. Southern Hemisphere for us is both temperate species in Australia and New Zealand, but also tropical breeding in Brazil. Okay, so and those are completely different. So there's more difference between tropical and temperates than between northern and northern southern hemisphere. The temperate work in Australia and New Zealand is also perennial ryegrass and legumes. So it's not that, and then in Northern Australia there's a link with tropicals again, because it's a tropical area where we test material that we develop in Brazil, we can test that in Northern Australia. Okay, and tropicals are completely different, they're different species which don't grow in areas where it's cold in the winter. So basically that's the big difference. Tropicals don't like the cold very good. There are different programs, different type of plants. There's no exchange between temperate and tropical, but there is exchanges between New Zealand and Europe, for example. These go back and forth, and also with Australia. So we sell Australian legumes in Europe or in the US. So that's the link. So it's more temperate tropical division than the southern northern hemisphere, I would say. And at the same time, having said that, we do not breed for turf in the southern hemisphere. So turf programs are only in the northern hemisphere, Europe, US.